Russia lost about half of its flagship tanks during the war years in Ukraine. According to the report, Russia has lost about 50% of the pre-war number of T-72B and T-72B3M tanks, as well as a significant number of T-80s since the beginning of the war. These tanks were among the most modern in the Russian arsenal, but due to heavy losses, the Russian army was forced to use older equipment, which was returned to service from warehouses. Since the beginning of the war, Russia suffered serious losses in military equipment. In April, hundreds of tanks were lost, and thousands of armored vehicles were reported. At the initial stage of the war, Russian losses were due to the effectiveness of the actions of the Ukrainian military, which was armed with modern anti-tank systems, and due to the lack of preparation for the invasion of Russia. In total, during the war, according to the Oryx military analysis project, Russia lost more than 1,700 tanks. Of these, 1,020 were destroyed, and about 550 more were captured by the Ukrainian military. The remaining tanks are listed as abandoned or damaged tanks, since the project has no photo or video evidence of their fate. Russia invaded Ukraine more than 18 months ago, unleashing a brutal war that still doesn't seem to be over. Coverage of this grueling conflict, marked in part by a series of Russian military mistakes that started early and continue to happen, but the country seems to be learning from the many mistakes it made at the beginning of the invasion. This is evidenced by its strong defense strategy that has so far managed to limit the Ukrainian counteroffensive. Although it has adapted, the exhausted and unmotivated troops of President Vladimir Putin continue to make their own mistakes. Putin vowed Russian forces would capture Ukraine's capital, Kiev, in a matter of days, 18 months after the city had not yet fallen. Looking back, uncovering the tactical mistakes that created Russia's logistical nightmare in Kiev, the country failed to use its significant aviation assets to achieve air superiority early in the conflict, dispatched its military convoys to conduct ambushes in and around the city, and failed to deploy battalion tactical groups. Immediately after the invasion, Russia's lack of preparation was likely a consequence of what many experts believe to be the country's most costly mistake so far, underestimating Ukraine. Putin deploying his troops into a battle they had never trained against a unified force willing to lose everything, Michael Kaufman, a Russia expert at the Center for Naval Analysis, said in February. Calder Walton, a scholar at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government and author of Spies, the Epic Intelligence War Between East and West, wrote in the Sunday Times last month that Russia's intelligence agency, the FSB, failed to provide Putin with adequate information about what his forces might face in Ukraine, thereby reinforcing a military mistake made by the Russian president himself. Russian troops have fought throughout the conflict with tank warfare, repeating the same glaring mistakes in various battles. On more than one occasion, Russia sent an unprotected line of tanks into an ambush in Ukraine, resulting in significant vehicle losses, even numbering more than 100 vehicles in the first few incidents in Kiev and then in Bucha and in Volodar, burnt tank carcasses strewn across the battlefield. Military experts in March told Insider that Russia failed to provide support fire to its tanks in combat and left them in the open, leaving them vulnerable to Ukraine's Javelin anti-tank missiles. Russian forces also directed their tanks directly through minefields, causing the tanks to explode. The country is struggling to prove itself adaptable, ignoring common sense in some tank-related incidents, and failing to integrate its tanks with combined arms, military experts told Insider in March. March estimates from Western defense officials showed that Russia had lost half of its main battle tanks in Ukraine, or even more, and estimates of losses have been growing ever since.